Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Business of Animation podcast, the podcast that is dedicated to helping budding animation entrepreneurs create financially sustainable businesses while also maintaining personally fulfilling creative careers. My name is Cabblow, I am your host, and this is episode 6. In today's episode, we are talking to Stuart Forrest, the CEO of Triggerfish, which is Africa's largest animation studio. And it was just really cool that he gave up some of his time to do this interview with me. That's me doing fan art. If you're on the YouTube version of the episode, you can see me drawing out the cover art of the episode. But we spoke about the story behind Triggerfish. We spoke about some leadership lessons that he's learned, and it was just really encouraging for me to realize that these big studios, they're actually really accessible and I can learn from them as I'm at the beginning stages of my career. So without further ado, here's the interview with Stuart Forrest. Thank you so much for joining me today, Stuart, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, and hi everyone. It's good to be here.
So take us through your day as a CEO of Triggerfish. Or maybe even a week. Last I heard, you had about 170 employees. So that, I imagine, that's a lot to get done. How do you divide up your time?
It's having a really strong team in all the executive level. So we have some fantastic producers and production managers and production coordinators, and then leads and supervisors. So there is a very strong the hierarchy, and people resist hierarchy, but when you get to a certain size, you kind of have to have people that work together in teams, and so that there's small teams that report into up the hierarchy. So most of what I tend to do these days is a lot of legal work. I think people underestimate just how much the legal work can be. Certainly we underestimated it on our earlier movies. International entertainment law is complicated, and it just requires a whole lot of time to make sure that everybody's rights are secure and everybody can distribute the property all over the world. And for that, we have to be very careful about the legals, because if you make a mistake, it's a massive mistake. So that tends to be where I put a lot of my time, working with the lawyers to finalize those kinds of documents.
And I really appreciate you saying that, because I'm kind of at the beginning days and learning how all of this works. So to hear you say that, the legal is actually really important. I know my mom, she's our producer. She is always harping on, let's make sure we understand what we're getting ourselves into. So I actually want to talk about, oh, yes, did you want to say something?
No, just to agree and say that's a good person to have as a partner, because a lot of artists who are drawn to the animation industry, they don't want to think about the legals. They just want to get into doing the work, and it can come back to bite them later. And clarity is so important in working out any working relationship.
So the Triggerfish started in 1996, so it means you guys will be a quarter of a century this year. So congratulations, that's very cool. I actually grew up watching some of those Takalani Sesame stop motion animations that you did. So this is very surreal to meet someone who made some of my childhood memories possible. What were those early days like at Triggerfish?
Yeah, it's been a long journey, and we've evolved and, let's say, pivoted a lot in terms of changing the way that we create work and the way we engage with the market. Ultimately, a business is always about engaging with the market and not losing your heart. But in the early days, as you said, Takalani Sesame was the first job that I was brought onto. I joined Triggerfish when it was about 4 or 5 years old, as a junior animator on Takalani Sesame, and worked on a couple of seasons for the local Takalani Sesame, and then we did some other seasons internationally as well. And what I learned on that, which was really interesting, is that the by bringing a local South African aesthetic and combining it with these really experienced educators in the Sesame Workshop in New York, we could come up with something quite powerful. And that excited me, this idea that we can work across the world using the internet, which was kind of new, but we could engage in creating content that had the best of both worlds, the deep experience in training kids and the fresh original aesthetic and artistic passion that we found here. So that very much fused into our DNA. We did 10 years of work for Sesame Street, and so it was slow. We took our time. We built a very strong base, but there were only at that stage, 4, 5, maybe maximum 8 people for the first 10 years. And but I think what we were learning is, very simple storytelling. Preschool storytelling is very you have to be very, very clear, and we always wanted to put something in it for the parents as well, who had to sit through it. So it was always nice to try and find a little joke at the end. So yeah, a very hard time. The money wasn't great, but it was fun, and we had a lot of fun. And yeah, I really enjoyed that.
So from then until now, what would you say were some crucial leadership lessons that you've learned?
I think the leadership is about bringing a team together to produce something. Something's going to come out of that leadership. So I think very slowly I've learned how to just engage with people and to find out where they are. I studied fine art, so it's helpful when it comes to artistic, what artists need and want, and which is quite hard sometimes for business owners to get, because when you've got your business hat on, you're really thinking about survival and about how are you going to pay the bills, how are you not going to let down your team, and how are you going to grow the company. And often the people who are what the company is, they can often get set aside. And I've done that many times. I've put the business goals over the people, and it's always come back to to make me go, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot what the company is about, really. And so I think what I've learned over the years is just listen to the people on the ground. The bigger we get, the more hierarchy we get, the further away from the actual work I get. And then it's easy for me to make decisions that is in the interest of the business, but completely frustrates everyone further down. So, we're constantly asking, what have we done wrong? What can we improve? And so I've learned to listen and engage and provide opportunities for animators to speak, because animators don't like to speak up. They like to just get on. And then this resentment grows. And then suddenly you go, well, where does that come from? Why didn't you tell me? So I think that's a big thing about leadership, is just create space and opportunity for the people that are following you to have their say and not feel judged and criticized, but let them say it and then listen and act.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to keep that in mind as we grow our team as well, because we're also 5 people right now. I was actually listening to a radio interview that you did for the Money Show on Cape Talk. And you said it took you 10 years to build relationships with broadcasters and producers all over the world. For someone who's still starting out and is looking to make meaningful relationships in the industry, what should you focus on and what should you make a priority when you're building those relationships?
Yeah, it's a great question. Having this business is about relationships first and foremost. If there's so much money that changes hands in an animation production, that you want to trust the people that you are bringing into your transaction. And so that doesn't happen overnight. You don't just pick up the phone to Disney and say, let's do something together. you spend years and years trying to get in front of them and just being around. And we have a publicist. We're constantly in the news. We're trying to be in the news, so that when the opportunity comes and someone says, "Oh, I think Triggerfish might be a good fit for this," it's because they've known us for 10 years already, and their confidence is there, and then we can move on. So with, for instance, the Magic Light Pictures productions that we did for BBC One, we had nurtured that relationship with Michael Rose for 8 years before we actually got that job. And that meant, sending emails, checking in, going to London, and meeting with him, and just building a relationship with someone who we identified him as someone that we wanted to work with first. And then we just kept being in his face until he felt that he really understood and knew us and could work with us and trust us. And so that's how these things, and then that trust builds other trust. Now, Michael is fantastic at telling everyone he meets how wonderful we are. So now I keep meeting people in Europe who go, "Oh, I heard really good things about you from Michael Rose." And this is fantastic, because then we get new opportunities. And so that's why, yeah, relationships, it is very, very important. You can't let people down. You've got to be honest. You've got to be transparent, and it pays off in the long term. In the short term, it can be difficult to do that, but always think long term when it comes to relationships.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'm one of those animators who I just want to get on with it and be quiet. And because we run Cabblow Studios, I have to meet people, shake hands. Well, okay, we can't shake hands now because it's COVID, but meet people, yeah, network, and try to get ourselves out there. So that's why I'm kind of using this as a mentorship session, as well as making sure that we get content out to the listeners.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have Mama K Super 4, which I actually already added it onto my list on Netflix of shows that I want to watch. And you've got SEAL Team, where J.K. Simmons is going to be a voice, and Seal, the singer, is also going to be a voice. So that's so cool. And you've got all these other TV shows and features that are in development as well. With the pandemic, how do you still plan ahead and make sure that the train keeps rolling with everything that you've got going on?
Yeah, well, the pandemic is an interesting thing. So yes, we have a lot going on. We have, I think, 3 TV series now, 2 in production, 1 about to start production, all with different partners around the world, but big studio partners. And we have a feature film that's finishing up this week, and a couple of others in development with a big studio. And we have a whole lot of short films that we're producing for different people as well. But so it is a lot. The pandemic has really been an interesting thing for us. I'm one of those people who've always said animation studios need to be in one place, and everyone needs to work together, because we all thrive on the creative energy and we learn from each other. And so I've always really not responded to the idea of a remote studio where everyone's working all over the world, because it just doesn't feel like what excites me about an animation studio. That said, the pandemic forced us to do that, and we actually found that people are working just as productively, if not more, that people are still stimulated, and that people are happier. They actually enjoy the flexibility, and just the working from home is working for a lot of people. Also the lack of distraction. I think what's going to be interesting in the future is the divide between the experienced people and the inexperienced people is going to get a little bit more difficult. So we bring in a lot of interns, between 10 to 20 interns a year, and they're graduates, mostly from one college. And we then work with them through an internship year. And by the end of that year, they are enormously productive. They've got a fantastic show reel. And almost all of them are hired as junior animators or lighting artists or compositing artists on our shows. And then we've built for the last 10 years, we've been doing that. And so our people really come in from the ground floor and they move up, and that is more difficult to do remotely. And that is going to be a big problem for people wanting to break into the industry, because until you've got that showreel in hand, it's very hard. And it's very hard to train people remotely. You just forget about them. And so I don't know the answers yet. I think it has to do with more things like this, where the training happens online, and there's certain people just making films. But that's the thing where I'm most concerned about how the pandemic is affecting us. But it's definitely, the transition to a remote studio is almost inevitable now. Most people don't want to come back. They're happier at home, and they're more productive at home, and they're more flexible at home as well. So the other thing about remote working, or the other thing about the pandemic, is that people are now a little bit more able to work wherever they want in the world. So we're seeing a lot of people get jobs in London and all over Paris, Dublin, and they can still work from home. There's no real difference, except that the paycheck comes in euros or pounds or dollars. And that often makes a big difference, because they're being paid as if they lived in London. So that is going to put a bit more challenge on South African animation studios, because that, traditionally we've been able to get a really good, take advantage of the cost of living here. And that, I think, is going to be more difficult for the senior people who can work anywhere in the world, and who may as well work anywhere in the world. So we've got to really find ways of attracting people, and that means paying them in dollars, really.
Wow. That's a huge challenge to take on. That's actually what you said just now is really important, the transfer of the skills from the senior to the junior, making sure that that still happens even in a remote setting. I didn't think about that. So that's also something that I would also keep in mind as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, training is so important, because we have a very small industry in South Africa and throughout Africa. It gets worse in the rest of Africa, but training is important, and we need to be constantly training the next people. The thing that concerns me a little bit is that the training we've done, it costs initially. It takes a lot out of the leads and the supervisors, because they actually just want to get on with the work. But here they've got a whole bunch of interns, and so now they have to be training those interns all the time, and that frustrates them, because it slows down the process. But it has benefit for the company, in a few months' time, when they become more productive, and they're learning and growing, and that's with the flexibility that people are now having with working all over the world. We have to reassess whether it's worth putting that training in, because we're probably going to lose them the moment that they are worth something. They're going to get a job anyway. There's an animation boom throughout the world. So is it worth training people and then losing them, and then having to train again and train again? And that's going to be an interesting thing for us to work through when we've done all the assessments, because it's actually, you can be very efficient if you just hire very experienced people, very small teams, very experienced people. You pay them a premium, but there's the overhead of training is gone, so you can really get on with the work. And that might be a model that we move towards, which causes a problem for the juniors and the mid levels.
But I suppose it's just something that you have to just see how to prioritize to solve that one.
Yeah.
Also on the pandemic, has that changed the way that you're going to be distributing some of your projects? Do you still have plans to have box office releases, or will you do some kind of hybrid where you're going to work with streamers as well, for example?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I haven't quite settled on the answer, but where I'm sitting now is that I don't know if we'll do another theatrical release. I think that the streamers are paying enough that it takes the risk out of theatrical. Is risky. It all depends on the weather. It depends on what else is showing at that specific time when it's released. The release needs to be planned months, if not a year in advance. The marketing campaigns are expensive. There's just so much. If you're an independent, if you're a studio, you can pick your date in 2 years' time, and no one's going to say no to a Disney film that's coming out on a certain day. That's in. But if you're an independent, they want to see the movie before they place it, and then they want to see it before anyone commits any kind of marketing budget. And the marketing budget is often more than the production budget. They spend more to market a film than to make it in the independent space. So that's really the big challenge. And they want to, that marketing budget, they want to cross collateralize with all income from throughout the world, because they don't want to be losing money on it. So it is it can be an issue or a risk to release theatrically. And now that the streaming services have really stepped up and had such a big subscription gain through the pandemic, I think we'll probably just release on streamers going forward and take out that risk, because animation is risky enough, and you want to try and bring your risk down as much as you can.
And in the same interview that I listened to that you did with Cape on Show Me the Money on Cape Talk, you mentioned that 4% of the company's income comes from Africa overall. So Triggerfish has to be international, and it would explain the success of Zambezia and Kumba all around the world. How do distribution partners like Cake Entertainment make it possible for Triggerfish to enter international markets, or do you still have to do that independently?
Yeah, I think moving forward, we've just opened our own office in Europe now, and we intend to do more of that directly. But there's always a transition phase where you start off as a small content provider, and you need to get to be a big content provider. So the easiest way to learn is to partner with people who are doing it already. And I'm a big believer in partnerships. You can do twice as much with a partner than you can do on your own, and you learn. And you don't want to learn everything the hard way. So if we partner with two companies, we partnered with E1 on one production and Cake on another production, we could actually do two productions at once. Whereas if we'd just done one of them, we would have had to just do the one and on our own. So we can actually really expand your reach, and then you're learning from both sides. And yes, you're sharing the profit, but you're learning. And if you're building a long-term company, then partnerships are fantastic. But gradually you want to move to being completely, they call vertically integrated, where you have from the content provider to the distribution chain, the whole value chain you own, and that way you can really get the most out of your properties. But they are helpful, partnerships.
Okay. The reason why I also ask is because my mom and I are trying to learn how to sell to the international market. And we keep coming across the term sales agent, distributor, and all of that. So we've been trying to figure out when is the right time to start talking to those kinds of people, and at what stage do you have to be able to have a conversation that's actually meaningful with those kinds of people,
Yeah, we've used a sales agent on all our films, mostly to sell the foreign territories, because we can't go to every single market. There's Cannes, there's Berlin, there's AFM, there's Hong Kong, and we just haven't got the resources to go to those markets and sell to distributors. We have licensing deals with 60 distributors at the moment, and we just could not manage that ourselves. So in that case, we get partnerships, and they take a commission of everything they do, but they take care of it all, and we don't worry about it. And we can get back to putting our very limited worry and energy into the work that we create. And we've got someone who's taking care of the business side of it. If we had 4 or 5 properties that we were exploiting worldwide, we might find it better to actually hire someone who has worked at a sales agency to come and work for us exclusively. But we haven't got to that point yet. So we're still working with agents. One of the things with Netflix and the streaming services is that we can work with them directly now. Once you've done your first big show with them, it's very easy to just phone that same person and say, hey, I've got another idea. Can I set up a pitch with you? And they go, yeah, sure, we want to hear, especially if the relationship is good. And then once you've done a show for Netflix, it's very easy to phone Disney Plus or Apple and say, hey, we've been working with Netflix, but we're really interested in what you guys are doing. Would you listen to a pitch? And it just happens very quickly after you've got your first breakthrough. So, yeah, I'm not sure if I answered the question.
No, you did. Thank you. It seems that Triggerfish is very much invested in African stories, but African stories that have a global appeal and a global reach. I remember there was a live stream that was on the Triggerfish Facebook page where you did an interview. I think it was an old classmate of yours from PE, and you said
Yes.
something that really stood out to me. You said that Triggerfish has a unique niche where you find raw talent and storytellers with like a specific point of view, with something to say, and then you help them develop their ideas into these unique African properties, like Mama K Super 4, for example. And I wanted to know, how did you develop that approach? What was your thinking?
Yeah, it's a great question. That's been an evolved approach. I would love to say I had this vision in art school to just help other people do this, but I didn't. At art school, like most artists, I wanted to make my mark on the world with my voice and to really, become a filmmaker is where I wanted to be, and gradually, as I've progressed in the, we talk about in storytelling a hero's journey. Every hero moves away from self-centeredness to a broader community awareness and a broader sense of purpose. And as that's progressed over 20 years of engaging in this, I've become more rewarded personally by having a broader sense of purpose, and that is to provide a platform for other artists, especially artists who traditionally are underrepresented on the world entertainment stage. And coming from South Africa with our legacy of apartheid and a legacy of underrepresentation, misrepresentation, it's such an integral part of how I've developed as a person that it means a lot to me to be privileged to be able to be part of addressing some of these core issues that we're seeing around the world now. We just also had a very amazing time that the world is responding, the world market is responding to the same thing. So I don't know if I could still sit here with this passion and vision if the market wasn't responding, because we have to survive. But it was a combination of having a vision and then having a very fortunate market situation that we could actually grow into that vision with so easily. So I feel very, very fortunate to be part of this process, but it didn't start this way. And I think a lot of companies need to be looking at how can they actually improve the world in what they do. It can't just be about making your own work. It's got to be about something bigger, because that's what it's hard. It's a hard business. And every now and then you wake up in the morning and go, why am I doing this? And if you end it with yourself and you go, I'm doing this for me, you're going to go, is that good enough? But if you wake up and go, oh, I know why I'm doing this. I'm doing it because it makes the world a better place. You've got to have the energy and the strength to move through the day and the problem in front of you and resolve it, because you have to. And you believe that it's what you have a purpose in it.
And I would like to say just thank you so much for the work that you do and all the initiatives that Triggerfish has, scholarships, Story Lab, all of these things, because they do make a difference. And they also show the world and show other creators like me that, it's worth your time, and it's worth the world's time to pay attention to us, that what we have is actually worthwhile and worth listening to. So I just want to say thank you really for that work that you do. And speaking of awards, Triggerfish is highly awarded. There's the Crystal for Stickman, and Zog won an Emmy, and all of the awards for Revolting Rhymes. How do awards and accolades, how do they help to change, or maybe, how do they help to change the conversations that you're able to have?
Yeah, they're so important because there's two things that you do work for: awards or money. Ideally, you can do it for both, but the awards are the easier thing to do because most people, when they come to you, they say, well, we don't quite have enough money, but you can make it. You get a chance to make it. And in the early days, you want to be chasing, that's a bad choice of words. We never chase awards, but we do want to be creating award winning quality work. So, and those, once you've got that Oscar nomination and the Emmy and the BAFTA and all those things behind you, then it's the conversation with the next funding partner is just so much easier because every executive that you work with at Netflix or Disney or Apple, or wherever they are, they have one job: spend the money wisely that they've been entrusted with, find quality content, and don't be embarrassed by it. They just don't want to one day be in front of their bosses where they say, you spent $20 million on this rubbish? What made you do that? And everybody doubts themselves a little bit. So awards just take away, like if I choose someone, I think, I really believe in this person, but I'm not quite sure if my taste is right. When that person comes and they've won a whole bunch of awards, I'm affirmed, and it's easier for me to make the decision, this person is the thing. Also, that person can then charge a little bit of a premium and say, you're getting this, I'm industry endorsed, and I'm going to charge you a little bit more than most people, but I've worked for it. And most people are willing to pay a little bit extra to get that. And so we're trying to move to a place where we can charge more, so we can pay more and attract more quality people at the high level, especially. So the awards help us build a profile that people are willing to pay a premium for.
That's fantastic. I'm gonna keep that in mind as well. Just to always push for high quality animation. That, I mean, even if it doesn't get an award, if it does get awarded, then it's just another thing that I can use to prove, the worth of the content that we create.
Yeah.
So, oh yes, carry on.
No, the quality question is so important, especially in the South African or African context, because quality is often a product or a property of your budget. So if your budget is too low, your quality, it's very hard to get your quality looking better than your production budget. And in South Africa, we tend to work with impossibly low budgets. So the quality is not on the same level as the rest of the world. And the danger is that it reinforces to ourselves that we're not as good as the rest of the world. We can only produce this. The public who see, there's a South African film and there's Pixar, they don't know that Pixar spent $150 million on that and you spent $3 million on yours. They just don't know that. And they're not really interested because they paid the same price for the cinema ticket. All they come away with saying is, yeah, South Africa is not quite there. And then that becomes ingrained in their heart. And in whether they're in America thinking, Africa is not quite there, or in South Africa, in Africa, we're not quite there. It helps this the stereotype of there's Western countries are somehow better than other countries. And so we have to be very careful about feeding into that. And that means there's an enormous responsibility on African filmmakers to push the quality, the sound quality, the music quality, the animation quality, the production values as hard as we can, so that we're not perpetuating that impression, because that impression lasts, and that impression has been given to kids as well, and that impression lasts, and so hard to change that later.
So what we do, what does the future hold for Triggerfish? What are your future plans?
It's it's quite broad. We've got a lot going on at the moment. Like I said earlier, we're hoping we've got a lot in development. So we hope to keep growing. We have to keep growing our Cape Town base. Our academy we're working really hard at trying to see if our academy can be part of the solution to this issue of we're not training enough juniors. We work a lot with international stakeholders who have been very generous in supporting us. So we're hoping to find a way that we can actually create maybe short films or something that we can use the academy and the foundation to bridge that gap. And we just have to keep doing what we're doing and become a real world player.
I mean, Triggerfish really is an inspiration for a lot of us South African animators, creators. So again, just thank you so much for what you do and for just taking up the space that you have. I don't know if this was how you thought you would be 20 years ago, 25 years ago, but the space that you have is truly an inspiration for everyone who's watching you, so thank you so much. And also thank you so much for your time, for taking the time to be on the podcast. I know I definitely learned something. So I know everyone who is listening will definitely learn something as well.
Thanks. And thank you for this amazing podcast. And I'd love to do it again in the future sometime. And there's still a lot more to talk about.
Of course. And that was the interview with Stuart Forrest from Triggerfish, the CEO of Triggerfish. I've actually had time now to reflect on this interview, and I actually spoke with my mom about what were some of the things that we took away from this. And there were a lot of points just practically on how to grow the business, on how to build relationships and partnerships that we can apply to ourselves, because our studio is in that place where we grow. But one of the main things that I just took away from this whole interview is that these big studios that seem really, really far away and seem really accomplished are actually quite accessible. And if you hear their story and you hear their journey, you can apply some of what they've done in their career and in their lives to your journey, to your path. He spoke about how they have multiple partnerships, whether it's with distributors or with other production companies, and how that helps them grow. And that for me then says, when I want to grow and expand, I need to then invest in those kinds of relationships with other collaborators so that we can grow our studio and expand, and knowing that it's good to have a lot of ideas in the works churning in the background. That tells me that that'll then keep our studio sustained if we're always coming up with new ideas and differentiating ourselves with those ideas. And timing, just the timing of how diversity is on our side right now. If you're a creator who comes from a unique background, or who's African, or who's black and female like me and my mom, or our studio, we've got all kinds of races in our studio and different genders. Just knowing that that's on our side right now in terms of creators and making the most of that timing. But overall, realizing that, African creators don't they don't make money here in Africa, they make money elsewhere in the world, which is very important because those currencies from other parts of the world are stronger than our African currencies, and so they can go a long way in terms of pushing the budgets and creating projects that have high quality, because we use the strength of those currencies here in our country to build good films and good products. So I hope that you all have gathered something from this conversation with Stuart Forrest, and hopefully we can have him on again in the future on the podcast, and we would have grown ourselves and they would have made some changes, and then we can talk about them in the future. But otherwise, I hope that you have a happy day wherever you are in the world. Bye.